She didn't knock. She just stood there with 2 suitcases, breath fogging the cold glass, waiting for someone to move first. When I finally opened the door, the house seemed to hold its breath along with us. I had lived in that house long enough to know its sounds. The way the floor creaked near the stairs, how the light fell soft in the hallway by late afternoon. My son grew up there. His laughter once filled the rooms. That morning, as his wife stood on the porch with packed bags and nowhere explained, the familiar walls felt suddenly uncertain, like they were listening for a truth none of us had said aloud yet. The kettle hadn't whistled yet, but I could already feel the house listening. Morning light crept in through the thin curtains, pale and undecided, resting on the hallway floor like it was waiting to be told where to go. I stood at the sink, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't filled, when the doorbell rang once, soft, almost apologetic. I remember thinking it was too early for company. I remember wiping my hands anyway. When I opened the door, she was already there. Not stepping forward, not stepping back, just standing. 2 suitcases sat at her feet. Upright, neat, the wheels still damp from the morning grass. She didn't say my name, didn't say good morning. Her eyes moved past me instead, slow and careful, like she was counting rooms she hadn't entered yet. Behind her stood my son. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not thinner, just quieter. His hands were empty, hanging at his sides, fingers brushing his coat like he wasn't sure what to do with them. He didn't look at me. Not right away. For a moment, none of us spoke. The house held that silence the way it holds heat in winter. Tight, deliberate, unwilling to let it escape. I could hear the refrigerator hum. The clock in the living room ticked once. Twice. She shifted her weight, but didn't reach for the bags. "Come in," I said finally. The words came out on their own, practiced from years of letting people cross that threshold without asking much in return. She nodded once and stepped forward. The suitcases rolled over the doorframe with a low, hollow sound, like they already belonged there. My son followed, careful not to bump into anything, like the walls might remember him too well. The door closed behind us. The hallway felt narrower than it had 5 minutes earlier. Family photos lined the wall. School portraits, birthdays, a graduation cap tilted sideways because he never liked things straight. She glanced at them but didn't stop. Her coat stayed on. So did his. I waited for an explanation to arrive with them. It didn't. "Coffee?" I asked. My voice sounded normal. That surprised me. She shook her head. My son opened his mouth like he might speak, then closed it again. He stared at the floor instead, right where the wood creaked in winter. The floor creaked anyway, like it knew he was looking. I stepped aside to give them space, the way I always had. But my body hesitated before my mind caught up. Something in her posture, too straight, too ready, made me pause. People who plan to stay usually soften when they enter a room. She hadn't. She reached down and adjusted one suitcase handle. Just a small movement. But it landed heavy. I thought of all the times she'd been here before. Holidays. Quick visits. Laughter that stayed near the kitchen, never quite settling into the corners of the house. She'd always asked where to put things then. Always waited. This time, she didn't. My son finally looked up. His eyes met mine for half a second before slipping away again. He smiled, but not with his eyes. That smile felt like a bridge made of thin wood. Useful, but not something you trust to hold weight. "We'll just," he began, then stopped. The sentence didn't come back. I nodded slowly, giving him time he didn't seem to want. I looked at the suitcases again. They were packed carefully. No straps loose. No tags dangling. This wasn't rushed. This was decided somewhere else, without me. I felt something settle in my chest then. Not anger. Not fear. Recognition. I walked past them into the living room, letting my fingers trail along the back of the couch. The fabric was warm from the sun. Familiar. Steady. I turned back to them, both standing where I'd left them, like guests waiting to be told where to sit. That's when I asked it. Not loudly. Not sharply. Just clearly. "Did you ask the owner of the house for permission?" The words sat between us. They didn't echo. They didn't need to. The house seemed to lean in around them. She looked at me then. Really looked. Her eyes widened, not with anger but surprise. As if the question itself hadn't occurred to her. As if the house had always been a given. My son inhaled slowly. I heard it. A long breath he'd been holding since before the doorbell rang. "I just thought," she started, then stopped. Her hand tightened on the suitcase handle again. The plastic creaked under her grip. I didn't move. Didn't explain. Silence has a way of finishing sentences better than we can. The clock ticked again. Once. Twice. Somewhere outside, a car passed, tires humming over pavement like life was still moving forward, whether we were ready or not. My son stepped slightly forward, then back again. He looked older in that moment. Not because of time, but because of choice. Because someone had finally named the space he'd been standing in too long. I should have said something, he murmured. Not to her. To the floor. To himself. She nodded slowly, eyes dropping now. The suitcases stayed where they were. Unopened. Unclaimed. I felt the house exhale. Nothing was resolved. Not yet. But something had shifted. A line had been drawn, not in anger, but in truth. And truth, I've learned, doesn't need to raise its voice. I turned toward the window then. Morning light had finally decided where to land. It rested across the floor, touching the suitcases without claiming them. Behind me, no one spoke. And for the first time since the doorbell rang, the silence felt earned. The suitcases stayed by the door. Not pushed aside. Not pulled farther in. Just there, resting on the mat like they were waiting for permission the way people sometimes forget to. I noticed that before I noticed anything else. The kettle had gone quiet again, the way it does when you ignore it long enough. Steam curled faintly toward the ceiling, then disappeared. I turned it off without looking back at them. The click sounded louder than it should have. When I did turn around, they hadn't moved. My daughter-in-law stood with her arms folded now, coat still buttoned, shoulders tight. My son leaned against the wall, not touching anything, like he wasn't sure where he was allowed to exist. His shoes were still on the mat too. I had raised him better than that, but I knew this wasn't forgetfulness. It was hesitation. Sit, I said gently. Not an order. An offering. They didn't. I poured the hot water out anyway, watching it darken the sink basin, listening to the soft rush as if it might carry something away with it. My hands felt steadier when I had something to do. They always had. When I turned back, she had slipped her shoes off at last. Set them neatly side by side. My son followed a second later, slower, like he was waiting to see if it was still allowed. That small movement, shoes off, coat still on, told me more than words could have. People who plan to stay make themselves comfortable in pieces. People who don't keep one foot ready. I gestured toward the living room again. This time they came. They sat on the edge of the couch, both of them. Not leaning back. Not touching. The space between them felt intentional. Carefully measured. I took the chair across from them, the one near the window where the light always settled in the afternoons. Morning light had shifted now. Sharper. More honest. I studied the room as if I were seeing it for the first time. The worn armrest. The faint stain on the rug from a spilled drink years ago that no one remembered anymore. This house held history quietly. It didn't announce itself. I wondered what she saw when she looked around. She kept her eyes on the floor. My son cleared his throat. The sound cracked halfway through, like it surprised him too. We didn't mean to, he began. I lifted my hand. Not to stop him. Just to slow the moment down. Words said too fast have a way of becoming lies without meaning to. He nodded and went quiet again. The clock ticked. I waited. Silence stretches differently when you don't rush to fill it. It shows you what people are carrying. I had learned that the hard way, years ago, standing in hospital hallways and kitchens that felt too clean for grief. She finally spoke. We just needed a few days, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Like she'd practiced it on the drive over. Until things settle. Things. That word does a lot of work for people. I nodded once, letting it sit. And did they? I asked. She looked up then, surprised again. Not by the question, but by the gentleness of it. Her mouth opened slightly before she caught herself. My son shifted beside her. His knee bounced once, then stilled when he noticed me watching. We thought, he said softly, it would be okay. Just for a bit. I looked at him. Really looked. He had once asked permission to bring mud into this house because he didn't want to dirty the floor. He had once waited at the door, soaked from rain, because he wasn't sure if I was home yet. Now he sat there older, married, still unsure, but in a different way. I leaned back in my chair. The wood creaked like it remembered all of him. Every version. It might be, I said. But that's not the same thing. She folded her hands in her lap. Unfolded them. Folded them again. Her ring caught the light. I wondered if she'd noticed how quiet the room had become. How the house wasn't pushing back, but it wasn't yielding either. I didn't think you'd mind, she said finally. There it was. Not apology. Assumption. I breathed in slowly, the way I do when I need to choose my next words carefully. This house, I said evenly, has always been open. But openness isn't the same as absence. My son swallowed. She nodded slowly now. Not defensively. Thoughtfully. That mattered. I should have called, she said. Yes, I replied. Just that. The truth doesn't need decoration. The suitcases sat where they were, untouched. I could see them from the corner of my eye, silent witnesses to a decision that was no longer moving forward on its own. Outside, a breeze stirred the tree branches. Shadows shifted across the wall like something reconsidering its shape. No one spoke for a while after that. And in that quiet, I realized something important. This wasn't about staying. It was about how people enter spaces they didn't build. I watched my son glance at the door, then back at me. Something in his face had softened, not relief, exactly. More like permission to feel something he'd been avoiding. We didn't want to burden you, he said quietly. I met his eyes this time. Then don't, I answered. But don't decide for me either. The words settled gently. Firmly. The clock kept ticking. And the suitcases, still by the door, seemed, for the first time, unsure of their place. The house had gone still in a way I recognized. Not asleep. Just alert. The kind of stillness that comes when something important has been said, and everything else is deciding whether to follow. The suitcases remained by the door, untouched, like they were listening too. I noticed how the light from the window fell across them now, sharp on the edges, soft on the worn fabric. They looked heavier than they had earlier. Or maybe I was. I stood and walked toward the hallway. Slowly. Not to leave the room, just to move the air a little. My fingers brushed the picture frames again. His school photo. The one where his tie was crooked because he refused to let me fix it. I felt the familiar ache of memory settle where certainty used to be. When I turned back, they were both watching me. Waiting. It struck me then that the question I had asked at the door wasn't the first one. It was just the first one spoken out loud. I returned to my chair and sat. The wood creaked beneath me, low and patient. I want to be clear, I said gently. My voice surprised me again. It didn't shake. I'm not asking because I don't care. I'm asking because I do. She nodded once. My son's shoulders lowered slightly, like something tight had finally loosened. I didn't mean to cross anything, she said. Her voice was quieter now, less rehearsed. I watched her hands. They were folded neatly in her lap, but her thumbs kept circling each other, slow and constant. A nervous habit. Everyone has one. Crossing usually happens before people notice, I replied. That's why it matters. She looked down again. The clock ticked. I waited. Silence can feel unkind when people aren't used to it. But I've learned it can also be generous. It gives people space to step into honesty on their own. My son spoke first. We've been arguing, he said. Not defensively. Just plainly. Not loud. Just quietly. For a while. I nodded. That tracked. Arguments don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they settle into routines. Into distance. Into packed bags that show up without warning. We didn't know where else to go, he added. I held his gaze. You didn't ask, I said softly. He nodded again. This time fully. I know. That was the moment something shifted. Not dramatically. Not cleanly. But honestly. She inhaled slowly, then let it out. Her shoulders dropped. When she spoke again, her voice wasn't careful anymore. It was tired. I thought, she said, choosing each word, that if we came here, things would calm down. That being somewhere familiar would help. And did it? I asked. She didn't answer right away. The question hovered there, gentle but insistent. Finally, she shook her head. No, she admitted. I think I just needed somewhere to land. I leaned back in my chair. That makes sense, I said. But landing isn't the same as staying. She looked up then. Really looked at me. Her eyes were damp, not crying, just close. Like they'd been holding too much for too long. I didn't want to feel like I was asking, she said. I nodded. And I didn't want to feel like I was being told, I replied. The space between us softened. My son let out a breath that sounded like relief, though nothing had been resolved yet. Relief, I've learned, doesn't require answers. Sometimes it just needs the truth spoken without punishment. I should have said something earlier, he said again. This time louder. More certain. Yes, I agreed. You should have. He didn't flinch. I stood again and walked to the door. Not to open it, just to stand near it. The suitcases seemed closer now. More present. I need you both to understand something, I said, still calm. This house isn't a pause button. It doesn't freeze problems just because you step inside. She nodded slowly. I know, she said. I just didn't know what else to do. I believed her. That doesn't make you wrong, I said. But it does mean we have to be honest. I didn't mean to put you in the middle, she said. I smiled softly. Not because it was resolved, but because it was finally honest. You didn't, I replied. You brought me the truth. That's different. My son stepped closer to her. This time he reached out. His hand hovered for a second before resting gently on her back. Not claiming, just present. I should have said something sooner, he said. To you. To both of you. Yes, I said again. The truth doesn't need variety. We stood like that for a moment. The house didn't feel tense now. It felt aware, like it had shifted its weight too. She glanced toward the suitcases. They were still by the door, still closed. I packed them like I was leaving something behind, she said. But I think I was really trying to carry it somewhere else. My son nodded slowly. I thought bringing you here would give me time, he said. But it just gave me distance. I moved toward the door then. Slowly. The wood beneath my feet creaked in that familiar way, as if marking each step. I bent and picked up one of the suitcases. Not to carry it inside, but to move it just a few inches closer to the door. The wheels clicked softly against the mat. She watched me. He did too. This house, I said, standing again, isn't a place to escape to. It's a place to come back to, if you're ready. She swallowed. I don't think I was ready, she admitted. That's okay, I said. Readiness can't be rushed. The door seemed closer now. Or maybe we were. My son walked over and stood beside the suitcases. Not guarding them, just acknowledging them. We'll go, he said. Not sharply. Not apologetically. Just clearly. She nodded. Once. Firm. They put their shoes back on slowly. Deliberately. The way people do when they want to remember how something felt. I handed her her coat. Our fingers brushed briefly. She paused. Thank you, she said, for asking the question. I met her eyes. Thank you for answering it, I replied. My son lingered by the door. He looked around the house, really looked this time. At the walls. The window. The chair by the light. I didn't realize how much I was avoiding, he said quietly. Most people don't, I told him. Until someone asks them to stop. He nodded. The door opened. Cool air slipped inside, carrying the scent of morning and something cleaner underneath it. Possibility, maybe. Or simply honesty. They stepped out together. Not rushed. Not hesitant. I stood in the doorway as they walked down the path. She glanced back once. He did too. I didn't wave. I just watched. When the door closed, the sound was soft. Final, but not heavy. I locked it, not to keep anything out, but to mark the moment. The house settled. The clock ticked on. I walked back into the living room and sat in my chair. Sunlight had moved again, stretching across the rug, no longer touching the door or the place where the suitcases had been. The space felt open. Not empty. Open. I picked up my mug at last and filled it. The kettle whistled this time, sharp and clear. I poured the water and listened as it met the cup. Steam rose. Quiet. Honest. Some questions don't end stories. They begin them. And that morning, in the stillness that followed, I understood something I hadn't before. A house doesn't belong to the people who enter it without asking. It belongs to the ones who are willing to speak and listen before they stay. About what you're asking. My son stood then. He moved closer to the door, standing beside the suitcases now instead of between us. That felt important. We didn't mean to assume, he said. I know, I replied. But assumptions don't disappear just because intentions are good. He smiled faintly. Not defensive. Almost grateful. We stood there like that for a moment. 3 adults. 1 house. A decision still forming. Outside, a bird landed on the porch railing. Stayed for a second. Then flew away. I watched it through the glass. I'm not saying no, I said finally. Both of them looked at me. I'm saying we need to talk about what yes actually means. She swallowed. And if the answer is no, she asked. I met her eyes. Then we'll face that too, I said. But not by pretending it was already settled. The house seemed to relax then. Just a little. The clock kept ticking. The light shifted again, brushing the suitcases like a reminder. Nothing had been unpacked. Nothing had been promised. But something important had happened. The question had done what questions are meant to do. It had opened the door, not to the house, but to the truth waiting quietly inside all of us. The house felt different after that. Not lighter, just clearer. The kind of clarity that doesn't comfort right away, but doesn't confuse either. We didn't sit back down. None of us seemed ready to settle into furniture. My son stood near the door, hands in his pockets now, thumbs hooked on the seams like he was anchoring himself. My daughter-in-law remained by the couch, one arm resting on the back but not leaning, as if she didn't want to claim even that small space yet. I stayed where I was. Stillness can be a boundary too. Outside, the breeze picked up. Leaves scraped softly along the porch. The sound came and went, like someone pacing without deciding whether to knock. "I didn't tell you everything," my son said suddenly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. I looked at him. I didn't say his name. Names sometimes pull people back into roles they're trying to step out of. He took a breath. Then another. "We've been quiet with each other," he continued. "Too quiet. Not fighting. Just stopping mid-sentence. Letting things pile up." I nodded slowly. Unsaid things don't disappear. They stack. My daughter-in-law's jaw tightened. She looked away from him, toward the window, where light stretched thin across the wall. "I didn't want to keep pushing," she said. "Every time I brought something up, it felt like I was asking for too much." He turned toward her then. Really turned. "I didn't know how to hear you without feeling like I was failing," he said. The words landed gently, but they landed. I felt my chest tighten, not with sadness, but with recognition. I had seen that look before. In mirrors. In marriages that lasted because they learned how to speak again. And in some that didn't. She nodded once. Not agreement. Acceptance. "So I thought coming here might reset things," she said quietly. Like we could breathe for a minute. I watched her hands as she spoke. They were empty now. No suitcase handle to grip. That felt important too. "And did you tell him that?" I asked. She hesitated. "No," she admitted. "I didn't know how." My son looked down again. But this time, he didn't stay there long. "I should have noticed," he said. "I was busy trying to keep everything steady." Steady can be another word for silent. I shifted in my chair. The wood creaked beneath me, reminding us all I was still there. Still listening. "This is the part people skip," I said calmly. "The part where intentions don't match impact." They both looked at me. "Good intentions don't cancel confusion," I continued. "And silence doesn't mean peace. It usually means someone's tired." My daughter-in-law exhaled slowly. Her shoulders slumped, not in defeat but relief. "I am tired," she said. The room didn't flinch. My son nodded, eyes still on the floor. "So am I," he said. The clock ticked. I waited. "What you didn't say when you packed those bags," I continued gently, "matters just as much as what you brought with you." She glanced toward the suitcases again. They looked smaller now. Less certain. "I didn't want it to sound like an ultimatum," she said. "Come here or else." "And I didn't want it to feel like I was being judged," my son replied. Like I couldn't handle my own marriage. The air between them shifted, not sharp but fragile. Like something thin being handled carefully for the first time. "That's the trouble with not saying things," I said. "They still get heard. Just wrong." My son let out a short breath through his nose. Almost a laugh. Almost not. "I thought if I stayed quiet long enough," he said, "everything would settle on its own." I stood then. Slowly. My knees protested the way they always do now. The movement drew their attention back to me. "I raised you to listen," I said. "Not to disappear." He looked up at that. I walked toward the window and rested my hand on the sill. The glass was cool. Steady. Outside, the day had moved on without us. Neighbors passed. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Life doesn't pause for conversations we avoid. "You both came here carrying more than bags," I said. "You carried everything you didn't trust yourselves to say out loud." My daughter-in-law nodded. Her eyes glistened now, but she didn't wipe them. "I didn't want to fight," she said. "I just wanted to be heard." My son stepped closer to her. Not touching yet. Just nearer. "I hear you," he said. The words were simple. Unpracticed. That made them heavier. She turned toward him. Their eyes met. Held. For a moment, I felt like I shouldn't be there. Like this was something meant to unfold without an audience. But families don't always get privacy when truths finally surface. Sometimes they need witnesses. I cleared my throat softly. "This house," I said, "can hold you. But it won't hide things for you." They both nodded. The suitcases stayed closed. No one reached for them. And in that quiet, I realized something else. The question I'd asked at the door hadn't created tension. It had exposed it. What wasn't said had finally found its way into the room. And now, there was no pretending it hadn't been there all along. The clock kept ticking. Not louder. Not faster. Just steady. Like it had always been. That steadiness felt important now. We stood there a moment longer than necessary, all three of us, as if moving too quickly might undo what had finally surfaced. My son shifted his weight, then stopped. My daughter-in-law brushed her sleeve once, smoothing a crease that didn't need fixing. Small movements. Grounding ones. I watched them the way you watch weather after a long storm warning, waiting to see what actually arrives. "I don't think we should stay," she said quietly. The words surprised me. Not because they were wrong, but because they were hers. My son turned toward her, concern flickering across his face. "We don't have to decide everything right now." She nodded. "I know. I don't want to pretend this fixes anything." That mattered. I felt something ease in my chest, not relief exactly. More like alignment. The truth had a shape now. "You don't have to rush," I said. "But you don't have to hide either." She looked at me then. Her expression wasn't defensive anymore. It was thoughtful. Tired but thoughtful.